Late Night Health continues. I'm Mark Alyn, along with the insane Daryl Wayne. Be sure to join us at latenighthealth.com and check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/Late Night Health Radio. During the last part of our show today, we're going to talk about the flu season. And there is an alert. It's supposed to be a terrible flu season, and there's a new product out there, a new test that will that addresses antibiotic resistance, so that you go to the doctor and say, I have the flu, I want a shot, and he says, no, you don't have a bacterial growth, you have a viral. Go home and drink a lot of soup and water, and you'll feel better. Rather than over-antibioticing you. So that'll happen in about a half hour from now. Right now we go to Los Angeles with a new friend. We're going to spend some time with Ann Hodder. She is a proponent of sex education for all. She is a sex expert. Would you call yourself a sex expert, Ann?
Sure. I call myself lots of things. For sure.
All right, good. To me, America's game is not a Wheel of Fortune. To me, America's game is sex. Mm-hmm. And everybody from the age of 12 on has some kind of sexual identity, preferences, and they probably happen earlier than 12, but they start, at 12 you start noticing people of the opposite sex or somebody you're attracted to. With me, it was Annette Funicello, which I know dates me. And also, I can't think of her name, but the tigress on the Brill Cream ad. And she was Agent 99. Barbara Feldon. So those two people really kind of got my juices going. Are people resistant to learning about sex, especially those who might be, say, over the age of 50?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, first, believe it or not, our sexual identity forms at birth. We just don't necessarily have a consciousness of it. So we are, whether we like it or not, sexual beings from the get-go. And sex education, of course, has, our country has a complicated relationship with it, of course, and it's a challenge to learn new things about very personal parts of our lives and our bodies at any age, but it can be especially challenging when you've been, living on the planet, existing as an adult, trying to figure out life for, 50-plus years. That's half a decade, and that's a lot of knowledge and experience and getting comfortable with yourself and your body and how you feel and how you interact with the world. And when you get confronted with the potential that some of the things you thought were true for half a decade might not actually be true, and even potentially they could be causing you additional difficulty or causing your partner or close loved ones harm, it can be really hard to reconcile that and get out of your comfort zone. But that's really what sex education is. It's sort of, and part of the process is let's let go of all the things that we are clinging on to desperately as facts, and let's give ourselves permission to just sort of exist in the gray area of what it means to be a human being with lots of feelings, and be open to different ideas and concepts and pieces of research that might be challenging, but at the same time might also open our minds in a way that makes life feel a little bit easier to live.
I think that I mean, sex is for procreation. That's one thing. But, and we're not really talking about that. We're talking about sex for fun, recreational sex. Are we not?
Yeah, it's sex for pleasure. I mean, if sex was just for procreation, we wouldn't have all of these fun things we can do that have nothing to do with babies.
Right.
There's all kinds of sex that we have. Majority of sex that people end up enjoying has nothing to do with sperm and egg uniting. Not just a portion of the population even has that kind of penis and vagina sex. So we know for sure sex is really primarily a pleasure-based activity that also could potentially lead to pregnancy if we're having that kind of sex.
And it can also lead to, STDs,
Sure.
sexually transmitted diseases are on a rise. And what's really interesting, we've said this before on the show, especially in retirement communities.
Absolutely.
And because older people, and I'm talking 70, 80, even into the 90s, these people don't use contraception, not to prevent pregnancy, but to prevent the transmission of diseases. It's almost funny, almost.
Sure. I mean, it surprises people, and it also makes people uncomfortable because it forces us to recognize that people of older ages are absolutely sexual beings, just like people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 20s.
Or 15.
Absolutely. I mean, HIV rates especially have been skyrocketing among the retirement population, and part of the reason of that is a complete lack of sex education. There's this idea that if you can't get pregnant, then you don't need to worry about anything anymore.
Right, and that doesn't make sense. Somebody who's 50, maybe their spouse passes. It doesn't matter if it's a man or woman. Their spouse passes, or they get divorced. And now they're on the, in quotes, dating scene. They're maybe in their 50s or their 60s, 70s. That even doesn't matter. It's got to be difficult to get back and get started. I mean, the 3-date rule for both men and women. I mean, do you jump into bed with the first person you go out with? Do you how do you wait? How do you discuss it? Well, I think you're attractive. I like you. I like spending time with you. Let's go to the movies and then let's go home. Does it happen that fast like it did in the 60s or the 70s? It's different, and it has to be different if you spent 30, 40, or 50 even years with one person.
Totally. It's really, it's unsettling. I've definitely worked with older people who have been in a monogamous partnership for the majority of their formative years. For some people, it was the only person that they had ever been with sexually, and when that relationship ended, it was sort of like they were having to experience events that happened during your teenage years, but as a 50, 60-plus age person, and it can sort of leave you feeling like you're an alien roaming a planet you're not familiar with, and it can feel really scary. And it's like you have to learn a completely new language. You have to navigate these websites now because everyone uses websites to meet each other. And, for some people, Facebook enough is difficult, or using email is a huge challenge. So imagine having to suddenly try to meet a potential romantic partner using this weird interface that is completely impersonal. And
right.
So it's a whole new learning process, and not everyone ends up feeling up for it, so they just decide, I'm too old for this, and they don't try. And I understand that, but at the same time, that's a resistance to change.
I remember going to clubs and bars to ostensibly meet somebody, and I found that clinical. Did you ever do that, Daryl?
I was in radio. I never had to.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was in radio, too.
I was a rock and roll disc jockey.
You were. I forgot about that.
18 on. So, no, I never had to go to clubs and bars and never really wanted to.
No.
I mean, I was there, but I never, quote, unquote, dated.
Got it. We'll leave it at that. Because even that is hard. And, there are, I can think of a place in the San Fernando Valley that is known to be a place for 50 plus to meet and greet and get to know each other. But that just seems, I don't know if it's backwards to me or what. Having been in married for a long number of years.
Now, I do have a dear friend that you know as well, which will remain nameless at this point, who is like in his late 50s, never married. And he's gone I've known him since 85, and he's gone from video dating, online dating, speed dating.
Oh, God.
All of them.
All of them. He's just did Match.com recently, but he's tried everything.
Wow.
I mean, all of them.
And yeah, it's just so. I guess the question to you, Ann, is how do we meet, and how do we know if it's appropriate to say, I'd like to have sex with you? And
well, that's a tough question. I think it's the most important thing, especially when we are physically in front of the person having an actual exchange. That kind of conversation is really important to have before any type of clothing has been removed. Before sex is even a twinkle in your eye, I think it's really important to get used to and get comfortable with having those kinds of conversations first. Partly because it's a big part of building intimacy, and it helps you turn on your empathy button. And without empathy, sex kind of sucks, especially when you're older and you're trying to get back into a groove that maybe you haven't been in for a couple of decades.
Got it.
So when you get to practice, how does it feel to have this type of intimate conversation with this near stranger I've just recently met but really, really think is hot? And then you then get to see how it feels to have them reply. And
we're going to take a time out. If you want information, by the way, on Ann, you go to Ann, ANNEHODDER.com. That's AnnHODDER.com. Ann and I and the insane Daryl Wayne return as Late Night Health continues. Don't you dare go away.
Welcome to Guide to the Soul. This is Robert Clancy. Opening your heart is the only way to allow all the light in. Unconditional love does exist, but it takes trust, something not a lot of people are willing to give. But how can you expect it if you don't provide it too? All hearts are refillable, rechargeable, and renewable. So why worry about being burned? By giving, you have everything to gain. Think of how beautiful your life would be if someone loved you without barriers, gave all of their heart to you without conditions, and wrapped their soul around you like it was your last day on earth. Today, you can be that person for someone else.
For more inspiration from Robert Clancy, visit GuideToTheSoul.com or go to the Moments with Robert page on LateNightHealth.com.
The latest from the greatest, the best in new music by classic rockers, with your host, the insane Daryl Wayne.
This is Alice Cooper, and if Daryl Wayne is insane, what does that make me? Criminally insane. Stick around to find out.
It is the latest from the greatest. We've had some really good conversations over the 5 years that this program has been going on with some great rock artists and some people from behind the scenes, authors and otherwise producers. Some of those have been captured on the latest for the greatest Volume 1. It's available on Amazon, or if you go to blackstoneaudio.com or Amazon, search for Daryl Wayne, Darrell Wayne.
I'm the Reverend Al Green, and I said Wayne insane.
You're listening to Late Night Health with Mark Alyn. The show continues in a moment.